This clip is going to be looking at sanctions. So I'm going to talk about the different types of sanctions that are available to judges. I'm going to be looking at the aims and objectives of sanctions, and I'm also going to be looking at what sanctions need to do in order to be effective. So first up, the different types of sanctions. Imprisonment obviously is the harshest sanction that's available to judges, and that's where the offender is incarcerated for a period of time in prison. A suspended sentence is where you're given a sentence of imprisonment, but you don't actually go to prison, so you serve your sentence in the community, but you still get given a criminal record. A community-based order is where you get a sentence that needs to be served in the community, and you end up doing community work. So the people that are picking up litter on the sides of freeways, those are offenders who have been given community-based orders. Intensive correction orders is where you go to an intensive correction centre and you have to do a certain amount of hours of correctional work to rehabilitate your behaviour and get your behaviour back on track. A fine, obviously, is just a financial sanction. Combined custody and treatment order is usually for drug rehabilitation. So you're incarcerated while you're being rehabilitated for your drug problem. Restricted involuntary treatment order is for violent offenders suffering from mental illness. So you're also under lock and key, but you're being treated for your mental illness. Youth Justice Centre order is a sanction that's really important for you guys to remember. And that's for offenders who are under the age of 18. And they can be given a sentence up to a maximum of 3 years in a Youth Justice Centre. It's important also to remember in Victoria we have the dual track system, which is where offenders between the age of 18 and 21, if they're assessed as suitable for a Youth Justice order, they can be Youth Justice Centre orders, obviously. So they can be given a Youth Justice Centre order, and that's usually only given if they've got a really good prospects of rehabilitating their behaviour. If not, they'll just be sentenced to adult prison. Hospital security order is where you're injured as a result of your crime and you need to be hospitalised, but you're still under lock and key. And a drug treatment order is usually not under lock and key. It's where you're just out in the community, but the judge gives you an order to receive drug treatment or treatment for your drug problem. Okay, moving on to aims or objections of sanctions. First off, so there's 5, and you need to be really familiar with these for your exam and SAC. So punishment is that's probably the most straightforward of the sanction, is that you're punished for the crime that you've done. Protection is for the protection of the community against the offender, and also for the protection of the offender themselves in some cases, and potentially for the protection of victims. Denunciation is basically sending a message to the community that the behaviour of the offender isn't acceptable to society. And deterrence, both general and specific, we need to be aware of the difference between general and specific deterrence. General deterrence is basically that the society or the community is deterred from doing a crime because they're aware that the sanctions that will be imposed on them if they do commit the crime. And specific deterrence is for offenders who have already committed the crime so that they don't do it again. And rehabilitation is basically trying to get offenders' behaviour back on track so it's acceptable to society. Okay, so finally, just quickly, to be effective, criminal sanctions must be appropriate to the severity of the crime committed. They need to be appropriate for the offender and take into consideration financial, social, cultural and health circumstances. They also need to take into account the age of the offender. They need to be acceptable to the community, so they can't be outraged at the decision given by the judge or jury. And finally, they need to be able to fulfill the aims of criminal sanctions. So we'll go back to the aims of criminal sanctions. Sanctions need to be able to fulfill these aims, not necessarily all of them, but some of these aims in order to be effective.